Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee in my studio. It's Friday, November 15th, and I'm drinking my coffee here out of a lovely Stein mug by Nolan Baumgartner. I should give you a close up. You can kind of see it's got great detailing. This is salt fired or soda fired, I think, actually, by Nolan. Nolan is on Instagram at Baumgartner/lowercase/clay, so you can see some of his work there. And so things are going like crazy in the studio this week. I'm trying to get ready for a big sale coming up. So plug for the things I'm working on now. That'll be coming up on Black Friday, so you'll be able to see some things coming up on Instagram as we get closer to that date. I've got these small moon jars, which I am working on. These are getting ready to go into the kiln. I've got small mugs. This one has a wave pattern on it. Yeah, you can see that pretty good. So I made some new paddles. That paddle is slightly over here, I think. Yes. So here's the paddle with the wave pattern. I cut that with the laser cutter, which is a new tool that we got into the art department that I'm really enjoying playing around with. And speaking of the laser cutter, I'm also making prints. So I'm making prints about bees related to my show, my installation show. So these are actually etched, laser etched onto wood. So there's one and there's another. Heart and lungs and bees. And so these will also be available soon. 8 by 8 inches for these. And yeah, so I'll be showing more about that soon. So, okay, advertisement over. I've been thinking about what to do and how to do it for studio coffee, and I tried a live video last week, which went well, but was a little bit distracting for me because it was hard. I wanted to follow the comments and also try to say something, and so I thought maybe I would try another one where I just record it beforehand, and so I'm gonna try it this way. And then whichever way is best or that you like best, I'll continue to go back for. So if ultimately, I'll try back and forth a few times. If you guys send me some feedback and let me know like what's the easiest for you. One of the things about the live videos I figured out is that they're only available for a short period of time. Only for 24 hours on stories. So this allows them to be seen more often or later. So just let me know what your preference is, and I'm happy to do either one. Today I wanted to actually talk to you about something that sort of put on my teacher hat a little bit, about sustainability and practice, artistic practice. So although this is about artistic practice, I think it's also probably relevant for most everything. But you know, I teach at a college, and so students are always, and parents are often, you know, wondering about how am I going to survive? How, you know, what makes this work? Is it possible to make a living? How do I make a living? All those sort of questions, all really good, valid questions, all questions that are very difficult to answer. I'm not going to try to exactly answer that question, although I'll be kind of skirting on the sides of that maybe, which is about a related question, which is I think a more important question, which is what makes a sustainable practice? It's great to make work and, you know, maybe even make a big splash at some point, or to be able to sell a bunch of work on Instagram, or however, you know, have a big gallery show, but it's really easy to get burned out, to get frustrated. There's a lot of rejection when you're an artist, and that can really wear on you. So, so how do you have a sustainable practice? I think that's really more the key question. A lot of times when I if I pose that question or people pose it to me, the things that they're thinking about are they might think create a sustainable practice are being able to make money, as I sort of mentioned, and yes, totally important to figure out how to make money. Not the thing that's actually going to make your practice sustainable. It's quite possible, and I've seen it happen, that you start making work and it starts making a lot of money, and then you feel trapped having to make the things that make a lot of money, and you're not actually making the things you want to make. And at that point, your artistic practice becomes soul sucking instead of soul giving. And it's really easy to get jaded and cynical, and that will not sustain your practice. A lot of times people think it's talent. You know, having great talent means you're going to be very marketable. Talent is great to have. It's actually not, I would say, the most important thing, or even maybe in the top 3 things that you need to have a sustainable artistic practice. A lot of times people who have talent, they have a way of working that gives them a lot of accolades. So one of the reasons most college students get into art in the first place is because somewhere in their high school, middle school years, somebody told them, "Oh, you're really great at that," and that's great. But when you start to get the rejections, which are definitely coming, then you start to question your whole sense of talent, and then the whole thing can crumble really quickly too. So just having talent isn't it. Passion is actually kind of the same way. So having a great passion for art or for art making, great, but not actually the most important thing, I think, for a sustainable practice. So drum roll. The most important thing, I think, is persistence. So just so you know, and I tell this to students all the time, I was never, all the way through college and grad school and all the art classes I took, and even at my college now, with my other art colleague faculty, I've never been the most talented person in any situation that I've ever been in art. I've never been the most talented person in a class by far. I've never been necessarily the most passionate person. My artistic gift is that I'm tenacious. I'm like a pit bull. So if there's something to be learned, I simply, once I get kind of interested in it, I just keep going until I figure it out. Or as I tell my students a lot of times with my pots, I keep firing them until they either turn out great or blow up. And either way, I don't care. So it can be complete failure or complete success, but I will keep going until it's one or the other. So that's sort of what I think is my particular gift. How then do you practice persistence? How do you gain persistence if that's not a strong point for you? Actually, I think that has to do with being very intentional about your time. So there's the main thing I would say, and this is oftentimes sort of surprising to people. I don't think students necessarily always take this as being as important as I want them to take it. You just have to show up. The most important thing is that so for me, I have to take the calendar out, my calendar app, and look every week and put blocks of time in that are studio time. Now, fortunately, my job gives me the opportunity to have a certain kind of rhythm for that. So once I have it for a semester, I can keep it the whole semester. But if you have to do it week by week, that's fine. But you have to have blocks of time on your calendar that are studio time, and they have to be non-negotiable. So you have to treat it almost like a job in that way. So the problem is that as soon as you decide that a certain amount of time is studio time, about a million other things will come along and try to steal your studio time. And it's very easy to let them. So you can't. You just have to say, nope, this is studio time. And it doesn't matter if you're inspired. That's also really important, because sometimes people will, the problem is, once you decide that there's studio time and you put it on the calendar, if something in your life doesn't try to interrupt it, oftentimes you, if you're like me, will try to find excuses to interrupt it because you don't feel like going to the studio because you're not inspired. And so that can be a real drain. So you have to get out of the mindset that being an artist means working when you're inspired. I think that it's more important that you work, and if you continue working, inspiration will show up. But if you're waiting for inspiration to show up to start working, you're doomed. You're never going to get there, or you're only going to get there sporadically, and your work's never going to grow. So I think it's more important you work first, and then the inspiration shows up. So sometimes I come into the studio and I shuffle things around, or I clean, or I put things in boxes, or I stare at things that are half finished and trying to figure out how to finish them. It doesn't actually matter. It doesn't necessarily matter that I come in and already know exactly what I'm going to do and do it. What matters is that I actually show up. And once I show up, once I commit to coming, I start to find tasks that end up becoming things that help me figure out what is next. So anyway, so that's really my key for this morning for the coffee break. Is I think the number one thing that will keep you in a sustainable art practice is persistence. You just have to be persistent. You have to commit to showing up, and you have to show up. Talent, passion, your ability to make money, all of those things are sort of external oriented. In other words, you feel them internally, but if you're not getting an external something that affirms that feeling, or money or accolades that tell you that your passion is in the right place, or that your talent is in the right place, if those things aren't continually feeding you, you lose your steam and your momentum. So I don't recommend that as being like your key thing. I really think if you just stay persistent, make time, blocks of time, commit to being in the studio at that time, that is going to be the number one thing that will keep you going. And then all the other things, actually, although they're important, they all become secondary. So if you are wondering about that question, like if you're a student, you're wondering how am I make a living, if you're a person who's got a job and you're starting to like work in art and you want to change, those are great things. There's actually courses out there online you can take that will really help you with those things. If you're in college and you're an art student, I would strongly recommend you take a business course or two. Something I never did, and so I've basically had to learn a lot of that stuff outside. Marketing is really good. So those things have their place. So know those, learn those things. Your art needs to be about your ability to show up and practice. It's always about practice. A little tip that I have, I learned actually when I was in China is I'm looking around because I keep houseplants in my studio. And that actually is a key for me to keep showing up. So in the summer when it's beautiful out and all I really want to do is play tennis, one of the things that keeps me coming in the studio is I'm like, okay, well, I know I have to go water the plants. And so just that little thing is enough sometimes to make me keep, just that little piece. I know it's totally like a false trigger, but it's enough. Like, it's just enough of something to make me kind of say, okay, I'll go to the studio. So, and then